There are Toyotas, Hondas, and Subarus on the road right now with over 300,000 miles on the odometer. Original engine, original transmission, still running strong. And the owners of those vehicles didn't get there by accident, but they also didn't get there by doing what most people think. Here's the thing. The number one reason Japanese cars die before 300K isn't a manufacturing defect. It's not bad luck. It's owners who heard the word reliable and translated that to mean, I don't have to do anything. That single misunderstanding has sent more Corollas, Civics, and Outbacks to the junkyard than any mechanical failure ever could. So today, I'm breaking down exactly what separates a 300,000-mile Japanese car from one that barely limps past 150. Some of this is going to challenge what you've been told. Some of it your dealer probably never mentioned. And at least one of these, I guarantee, is something you're not doing right now. Let's address this head-on. Toyota, Honda, and Subaru have earned their reputation. These are genuinely well-engineered vehicles. Toyota's 2GR V6, Honda's K-Series 4-cylinder, Subaru's FA and FB Boxer engines. They're built to last. That part is real. But here's where the problem starts. People buy a Camry or a CR-V or a Forester, and they think the reliability is automatic. Like it's baked in at the factory, and nothing they do matters. That couldn't be more wrong. Think about it this way. A well-built house will still fall apart if you never fix the roof, never clean the gutters, and never address a small leak. The foundation is solid, but neglect is neglect. Same exact principle with these vehicles. The data backs this up. If you look at high-mileage vehicle surveys, the cars that make it past 300K almost always have one thing in common: consistent, proactive maintenance that goes beyond the bare minimum in the owner's manual. And that bare minimum part, that's where the hidden truth actually lives. If I could only give you one piece of advice from this entire video, it would be this: change your transmission fluid regularly, regardless of what your owner's manual says. Here's what most people don't realize. A lot of modern Toyota, Honda, and Subaru models list transmission fluid as lifetime or have absurdly long intervals, sometimes 100,000 miles or more. And technically, under laboratory perfect conditions, that fluid might last. But you don't drive in a laboratory. Every time you sit in stop-and-go traffic, every time you tow something, every time it's 95 degrees outside and you're climbing a hill, that transmission fluid is cooking. It's breaking down. And once it degrades past a certain point, it stops protecting the internal clutch packs and valve body. That's when you start getting harsh shifts, slipping, and eventually total transmission failure. Here's the move. For a Toyota automatic, especially the 8-speed units in Camrys and RAV4s, change that fluid every 60,000 miles. Honda CVTs, every 30,000 to 40,000 miles, and use genuine Honda HCF2. Subaru's Lineartronic CVT, same range, 30 to 40,000, and only Subaru CVT fluid. The cost? Around $150 to $250 at an independent shop. A transmission replacement? $4,000 to $7,000. That math isn't even close. Fleet managers figured this out years ago. Commercial fleets running Camrys. And Accords change transmission fluid at strict intervals, regardless of manufacturer recommendations, because they've seen what happens when you don't. Now here's where it gets interesting, because Toyota, Honda, and Subaru are not identical in how they age. Each brand has specific vulnerabilities, and if you don't know yours, it'll sneak up on you. Toyota: oil consumption on certain engines. The 2AZ FE 4-cylinder that went into Camrys, RAV4s, and Solaris from roughly 2006 to 2011 has a well-documented piston ring issue. These engines can burn a quart of oil every 1,000 to 2,500 miles without throwing any codes. If you're not checking your oil between changes, you can starve the engine without ever seeing a warning light. Even the newer dynamic force engines, fantastic engineering, still benefit from oil level checks every couple thousand miles. Honda: the 1.5-liter turbo fuel dilution issue. This engine is in the Civic, CR-V, and Accord from 2016 onward. In cold climates especially, fuel can wash past the piston rings and dilute the oil. You'll notice the oil level actually rising on the dipstick. Honda issued a software update, but the fundamental design hasn't changed. If you're in a cold climate with this engine, consider changing your oil at 5,000 miles instead of the recommended 7,500, and always check for that rising oil level. Subaru. Head gasket failures on older models and oil consumption on the FB series. The EJ25 engine, found in Outbacks, Foresters, and Legacies, through 2012, is notorious for external head gasket leaks. If you own one, get it inspected at 100k miles and budget for the repair. The newer FB engines improved this significantly, but they introduced their own oil consumption pattern. Check your oil regularly. Seeing a pattern here? Listen carefully to this part, because the cooling system is where I see the most neglect, even from owners who are otherwise doing everything right. Coolant isn't just antifreeze, it's a corrosion inhibitor. The additives in your coolant protect aluminum cylinder heads, water pump seals, radiator tubes, and heater core passages from corroding from the inside out. And those additives have a lifespan. For Toyota's super long life coolant, you get about 100,000 miles on the first fill, then every 50,000 after that. Honda's Type 2 coolant follows a similar schedule. Subaru's super coolant also degrades on a comparable timeline. Here's what happens when you ignore this. The coolant turns acidic. It starts eating aluminum. Tiny particles of corroded metal circulate through the system, clog passages, damage water pump impellers, and eventually cause localized hotspots in the cylinder head. That's how you crack a head, or blow a gasket on an engine that should have lasted another 150,000 miles. A coolant flush costs about $100 to $150. A cracked cylinder head on a Subaru Boxer engine? You're looking at $2,500 to $3,500 in labor alone because the engine has to come out. Not worth the gamble. This is critical, and it depends entirely on which engine you have. If your engine has a timing belt, and this includes the Honda J Series V6, older Subaru EJ engines, and some older Toyota V6, you have a replacement interval. It's usually between 90,000 and 105,000 miles. Miss it, and if that belt snaps on an interference engine, the pistons hit the valves. Game over. You're looking at a new engine, or a $3,000 to $5,000 valve job. If your engine has a timing chain, most modern Toyota 4-cylinders, Honda's K, and L Series, Subaru's FA and FB engines, you're not on a hard replacement interval. But that doesn't mean ignore it. Timing chains stretch over time, and stretched chains cause variable valve timing errors, rough running, and check engine lights. The key to chain longevity? Oil. Clean, fresh, correct weight oil. Chains ride on oil-fed tensioners and guides. Neglect your oil, changes, and you're accelerating chain wear every mile you drive. So the takeaway, know whether you have a belt or chain. If it's a belt, replace it on schedule with the water pump. Always do both at the same time. If it's a chain, keep your oil changes religious and listen for any rattling on cold starts. That's your early warning. Here's something the maintenance schedule in your glove box probably doesn't mention. If your Toyota, Honda, or Subaru was built in the last 10 years, there's a good chance it has direct injection. And direct injection creates a problem that didn't exist in older port-injected engines. In a port-injected engine, fuel sprays across the back of the intake valves, which actually cleans them. With direct injection, fuel goes straight into the cylinder. The valves never get washed. Over time, oil vapors from the PCV system bake onto those valves and form carbon deposits. Thick, crusty buildup that restricts airflow and causes misfires, rough idling, and power loss. Toyota's dynamic force engines, Honda's 1.5 turbo, and certain Subaru FA engines are all susceptible. Some manufacturers are moving to dual injection, port and direct, which helps. But if you have a purely direct injected engine, you should plan for a walnut blast cleaning every 60,000 to 80,000 miles. It costs around $300 to $500, and it makes a massive difference in how the engine breathes and performs at high mileage. An intake valve cleaning isn't on any factory maintenance schedule. But if you want 300K, it needs to be on yours. This is the section most people skip. And I get it. Struts and bushings aren't as exciting as engine talk. But here's what they don't tell you. Worn suspension components don't just make the ride uncomfortable, they increase stress on every other system in the car. Blown struts let the chassis bounce excessively, which fatigues body mounts, stresses CV joints, wears tires unevenly, and even puts extra load on engine and transmission mounts. Those mounts crack, and suddenly you've got excessive drivetrain vibration that accelerates bearing wear. At 100,000 miles, inspect your struts, control arm bushings, sway bar end links, and ball joints. Most of these are wear items with a lifespan. Replacing struts on a Camry or CR-V runs about $600 to $900 for all 4 corners. Replacing a damaged CV axle because a worn strut let it over-articulate. That's another $300 to $500 on top. Think of the suspension as the immune system of the car. When it's healthy, it absorbs the punishment so the expensive components don't have to. So what actually separates people who hit 300K from people who trade in at a 120K? It's not money. Some of the highest mileage vehicles I've seen belong to people on tight budgets who simply prioritize the right things. It's a mindset shift. Instead of thinking, my car is fine until something breaks, high mileage owners think, what's due next? They keep a simple maintenance log, even a note on their phone, tracking when fluids were last changed, when the timing belt is due, when the coolant needs refreshing. They don't chase the cheapest oil change. They use the correct spec oil, Toyota's 0W20, Honda's specified grade, Subaru's recommended weight. They don't use universal transmission fluid when the manufacturer specifies a proprietary formula. Small details? Maybe. But at 250,000 miles, those small details are the difference between an engine that purrs and one that knocks. And honestly, this is where these 3 brands reward you. Because the underlying engineering is so solid, consistent maintenance actually pays off exponentially. A well-maintained Corolla at 250K drives almost identically to one at 80K. You cannot say that about every brand. That's the real hidden truth. These cars want to last. You just have to let them. So let's bring it home. If you want your Toyota, Honda, or Subaru to reach 300,000 miles, it comes down to this. Change your transmission fluid on real-world intervals. Know your engines. Specific weakness. Never neglect the cooling system. Stay ahead of timing components. Deal with carbon buildup before it deals with you. And don't forget the suspension that holds it all together. None of this is complicated. None of it is expensive compared to the alternative. It's just about being intentional. I'm going deep on brand-specific maintenance schedules. In upcoming videos, a full 300K mile plan for Toyota, then Honda, then Subaru, with exact intervals and part numbers. If that sounds useful, subscribe so those don't slip past you. And drop a comment. What's the highest mileage you've ever hit on a Japanese car? I want to hear the war stories. I'll see you in the next one.